Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over 10 more legendary weapons that have been leaked in Outriders. Now before we get into the video, less than 5% of people that watch my videos are subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all of my uploads. And if you're someone that doesn't want to be spoiled on these legendary weapons and you're someone that wants to see them for the first time when you loot them, I'd recommend not watching this video. And also I'd recommend going and watching the first video where I go over a different 10 legendary weapons that were leaked, because I go over some additional information as well. And first off, we have the Icarus legendary automatic sniper rifle, and I wanted to go over this one first because it is a little weird. So the first video I went over a weapon that had the same exact tier 3 mod as this sniper, and from everything the developers have said, all legendaries and all the other legendaries we've seen have all had their own unique tier 3 legendary mod. So I'm not certain why these two weapons both have the same one. I'm not certain if whoever leaked all these changed the mod on one of these weapons, or if there was some type of issue with how these weapons were obtained that for some reason put two of the same mods on two legendary weapons. And I'm assuming on one of these weapons in the full release of the game might have a different mod on it. It's a pretty good chance that one of them is going to have something different, so keep that in mind. And like I said, going over the first 10 legendaries that were leaked, don't pay much attention to the specific stat numbers on these weapons. But first, we have Ultimate Anomaly Surge. Critical shots spawn an anomaly energy blast that deal damage in a 2-meter radius. Like I said with the weapon that had this in the first video, this is going to be incredibly strong for killing bosses and more elite enemies, because since it's only a 2-meter radius for the blast, it's not a big AoE, so it's going to be hard to hit multiple enemies with that. But if you could just spam a ton of shots into a enemy's head and constantly get crits, this is going to add up an extreme amount of additional damage very, very quickly, especially since there's no cooldown for this. And then the tier 2 mod is Brain Eater. Critical shots do not consume ammo. Next up, we have Darkness Charmer, a legendary pump shotgun, and the tier 3 mod for this is Grand Opening. Landing a hit with the first bullet in a magazine creates a powerful explosion, dealing 172,000 damage in a 5-meter radius. Now this tier 3 mod is something that's a little bit more built for AoE damage than say the Anomaly Surge mod we just went over, because it's a 5-meter radius, so it's a much larger area. But something different with this one is that it's the first bullet in each magazine. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a build or a specific weapon that you can reload very, very quickly. Maybe there's a weapon with only one round in the magazine that has some super quick reload or something like that allows you to just constantly get this effect to go off, because it's a very high amount of damage with a decent sized area. So you would definitely want something where you're constantly reloading and using that first bullet to get as much out of this mod as you can. And then we have Herpetum Mobile. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but you instantly replenish your magazine if you kill an enemy with 30% or less ammo remaining in the magazine. Now this has a cooldown of 0 seconds. I'm sure that's just messed up text on the mod, because any other mods that don't have a cooldown don't show it has a cooldown. And this mod seems like something that could be pretty strong, especially later into the game, because you're going to be taking much more bullets to kill enemies. And you could also have gameplay around causing this to proc more, because you could get an enemy low, maybe shoot a different enemy with a couple shots to get to that point, shoot the first enemy, and then instantly refill. And you could definitely get to the point where you're never having to reload if you use that mod correctly. Next, we have Deathshield, a legendary automatic shotgun, which in my opinion is one of the coolest looking weapons I've seen for this game so far. The tier 3 mod for this is Fortress. Receive up to a 43% damage bonus based on your armor. And I'm not exactly certain how this scales and if this number is static on the mod. I'm not sure if this 43% is because whatever character is wearing this has a certain amount of armor, or if this is the max you can get and this is static. Because if it's not static, you could potentially be getting a lot more of a damage increase depending on how much armor you have. And depending on how it ends up playing out, you could possibly have a build that goes into as much armor as they possibly can and has this tier 3 mod on something, giving them just a massive base damage increase, making the gun extremely strong, and you being a super tanky character with all that armor. Could be something that could essentially allow a specific build to be built around that mod. Then the other mod is Striga, 30% of critical damage damage is returned to you as health. And this mod is definitely going to be used in some critical builds. You just healing for 30% of critical damage you deal is absolutely massive. I can definitely see builds being like a high health build that doesn't have many other defenses with just having this mod on their main weapon and being able to sustain their health just by constantly dealing crits. Next up, we have Disintegrator, a legendary revolver, and the tier 3 mod is String of Gauss. Shots link up to 5 enemies in a 5 meter radius of the shot and deal 88,000 electric damage to each of them, cooldown of 2 seconds. And this is really cool because it reminds me essentially of something like chain lightning, where you just shoot an enemy, then lightning chains between a ton of different enemies in the area. And this mod is definitely going to be something that I could see being heavily used on, say, a secondary weapon or even a secondary main weapon because of the high amount of AoE damages can deal. And with only a cooldown of 2 seconds, it could definitely be something that fills that slot because you could shoot this shot, switch to another weapon, and then after a little bit switch back and just shoot one shot of a weapon you have this on, allowing you to do that big amount of AoE damage. I'm definitely curious to see the animation on that because it definitely sounds like the animation is going to be really interesting for that. Then the other mod is Soul Devourer. Killing shots regenerate 8,000 points of health. And like I said, don't worry too much about the numbers, but comparing this to some of the other numbers, it seems like that mod is going to be pretty strong, especially if you can kill enemies very quickly. So that might be a really good mod to have on a weapon to switch to and finish enemies off on to get a ton of healing. And then we have Enoch's Blessing, a legendary pump shotgun. And this is another one of those weapons that in my opinion just looks incredible. Pretty much all these legendaries are incredibly unique, but some of them just look so cool. And the tier 3 for this is Life and Death. Killing shots create a blast that restores 33% of health to players. In playing in a group, this can be massive because this restores a percentage of health, an essential third of every player's health in the party, which is pretty massive. If you're playing with a group of players, I could definitely see a support player having this mod as one of their main mods. But also something with this, it doesn't say where the blast is created because there's a pretty big difference in gameplay if the blast is created at the character that's killed, so at the enemy that dies to the shot, or if the healing blast is created on the player that's using the weapon. I'm assuming it's on the thing that's killed and that this is going to facilitate a group of players that are much more close range builds, allowing them to all be close to an enemy. That enemy dies with this weapon and it heals everybody for a third of their health. Either way, this I think is going to be a decently strong mod for group play and not as strong for solo play. Then the tier 2 mod is Gravedigger's Frenzy. Critical shots increase your critical damage by 50% for 5 seconds, just a general damage increase. And then next we have Fatal Symbiont, a legendary SMG, and the tier 3 mod is Dark Sacrifice. During combat, your weapon drains up to 50% of your maximum health in exchange for a 75% weapon damage bonus. Now this is one of the most interesting tier 3 mods I've seen so far because there's so many possible ways it could work. First off, I'm wondering if this is just like right when you get in combat, if you shoot something then it activates, or how it actually triggers, and also what it means by drains 50% of your maximum health. Does it mean it actually just essentially deals 50% of your health bar as damage to you and then you can heal that up? Or once you get in combat and shoot something, does it effectively half your health but keep you at 100%? Say if you have 5,000 health, does it then put you to 2,500 maximum health while in combat with this, essentially turning you into more of a glass cannon build, and you have to build your character around still being able to survive with half your health? I'm not exactly certain how this works. It's going to require some testing to see how this works, but this is definitely one of the most interesting tier 3 mods I've seen so far. Seems very interesting. I could definitely see some builds being centered around using this mod. Then we have Bleeding Bullets. Shots inflict bleed, cooldown of 8 seconds. Then we have Heir to the Desert, a legendary assault rifle, and its tier 3 mod is Sandstorm. Shots conjure a sandstorm, dealing a ridiculous amount of damage over 5 seconds, cooldown of 5 seconds. And this again is another incredibly interesting mod, not because the effect is like super complex or something like that, because the effects just seem really cool. I'm wondering how this sandstorm is going to look. I'm assuming it's probably going to use the same animation as the elites that can spawn like fire tornadoes and stuff. have, I'm assuming it's going to be something in the vein of that. And that is so cool that you could just shoot enemies and then a tornado or a sandstorm pops up and starts swirling around and just dealing tons of damage. And also something else interesting about this is it just says shots. I'm wondering if this is a 100% chance or if there's like a low chance for this to proc, and just getting as many shots on an enemy as you can to get it to proc as much as possible is going to be what you want to do with this. So maybe putting it on like a fast shooting SMG could be really good. And then also I'm wondering how big this is. How easy is it going to be for it to hit multiple enemies? Also, it's over 5 seconds and has a cooldown of 5 seconds. So depending on the proc rate, you could have one of these up 100% of the time. So most of the questions on this are how much is going to proc and how the effect is actually going to work. But overall, an incredibly exciting mod. I can't wait to actually get this weapon and use this mod and see how it looks. Then the other mod is Bleeding Bullets. Shots inflict bleed, cooldown of 8 seconds. Then we have Inferno Seed, Legendary Assault Rifle. The tier 3 is Wrath of Moloch. Critical hits cause an explosion, dealing almost 300,000 damage and inflicting burn on enemies within a 5-meter radius, cooldown of 3 seconds. And this one seems to be another massively powerful AoE damaging mod. This one clearly seems to be something a pyromancer would want to use, because you hit a critical shot, pretty much does a massive fire explosion that also inflicts burn on everything in a 5-meter radius. And 5-meter radius seems to be the biggest radius any mods have in Outriders, so it seems to be a decently large radius. And then it only has a cooldown of 3 seconds. And having pyromancer have a ton of abilities that do additional things or work off of burn, this could be pretty massive for a pyromancer build. And then for the tier 2, we have Brain Eater. Critical shots do not consume ammo. Then we have a Lucky, a legendary revolver. The tier 3 is Pinball. Every critical shot ricochets to 4 enemies within a 5-meter radius, dealing weapons double base damage. Now the grammar on that seems a little bit weird, but it sounds to be essentially when you hit a crit, if there are 4 enemies in the area, it ricochets the bullet 4 times and it deals double the base damage of the weapon. So this specific weapon has 5,149 base damage. So it would deal double that, dealing over 10k. And that's just the base damage. So it's going to scale off of crit damage and all that type of stuff. And this mixed with some other mods, I can see being absolutely ridiculous, because there's a pretty good chance that this shot is going to apply other on-hit effects. So you could definitely have something like, say, this with a tier 3 mod that applies status effect. You hit a crit, there's a bunch of enemies in the area, you just applied a status effect to 5 total enemies and dealt a bunch of damage to all of them. It could definitely be something that's really crazy when synergized and combined with other effects. Then the tier 2 mod is Improved Toxic Bullets. Shots inflict toxic on enemies. And one other thing with the tier 3 mod of this, I'm wondering if the ricochets have at all scaling damage, or if the ricochets are just based off double the damage of the weapon's base damage, or if it's somehow going to work off the damage of the crit, or if it's somehow going to take other damage multipliers from your gear into account. It's going to need some testing to see how good the ricochet actually is. And then finally, we have the Master Tool Legendary Assault Rifle, and the tier 3 mod is Dome of Protection. Killing shots summon a bullet-stopping dome for 5 seconds. Cooldown of 5 seconds. So first off, you can have this up 100% of the time because the cooldown and the duration are matched. Smart of them doing that, because if they didn't have a cooldown, you could just spam bubbles everywhere. One of the most interesting things about this is it says a bullet-stopping dome. I would normally think that this was just the time-slowing circle of tricksters, because they have other legendary effects on weapons that are abilities from other classes, but this says bullet stopping. The Trickster's Dome doesn't stop bullets or projectiles, it just slows them down. So I'm wondering if this is going to be a physical dome that legitimately just stops bullets, or I'm wondering if this is going to be something that's on you. So it could possibly be the Trickster's Slow Time Dome, it could possibly be some type of dome that works like the Devastators reflect bullets, just in a dome form, where it stops all bullets, and maybe since it's a dome, it doesn't reflect them back, it just stops them and drops them. This will definitely require some testing, and depending on how this plays out, this mod could be incredibly strong as a defensive tool. And then we have Herpedum Mobile again. You instantly replenish your magazine if you kill an enemy with 30% or less of ammo in your magazine, cooldown of again 0 seconds for whatever reason. And that is all of the leaked legendary weapons I want to go over today. Again, just like the first video, these weapons are all so incredibly unique when it comes to the looks of the weapons. They're some of my favorite looking weapons in any shooter type of game, and a lot of the mods are incredibly interesting, and I'm very excited to earn a lot of these weapons and then see what the tier 3 mods actually do, how the animations for a lot of them look. So subscribe if you want to see more Outriders or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video, leave a comment down below what you guys think about all these weapons, and thanks for watching.